Hi, I'm Anne Green, and this is part one of my multi-part series called Don't Say Schwarzenegger. I'll be talking about how I survived an attempted murder in 2015 and the ensuing aftermath of corruption and stalking and intimidation and everything that I experienced since. I suffered a traumatic brain injury during this assault, and I've dealt with everything from stalking, hacking, intimidation, witness tampering, obstruction of justice. There's racketeering going on. There's a lot of stuff, and it's going to take me many parts to cover it all. There's a lot of characters involved, a lot of places over the course of 9 years, like Game of Thrones. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you. I'm going to do my best to make it clear and concise. I'm making this video because even though we won criminal and civil trials, we won. The defendants still haven't had to take any accountability. I still haven't received justice. The other victims haven't received justice. And the justice system has failed over and over and over again. And I've been documenting every single thing along the way. And I'm hoping the public can help me, can support me, believe me, and protect me, and bring these men to justice, because the system won't do it. I'm just going to talk about, in this first part, I guess, what happened on that night. 1 month from today, it'll be 9 years since the incident occurred. April 17th, 2015. Me, my older brother, and two of his co-workers, a guy and a girl, the four of us all went to this little VIP bar called The Nice Guy. It's in West Hollywood. And the four of us were inside. I remember holding my Stella beer, and at the time I was a cigarette smoker, and I said, I'm going to go step out into the smoking section, and I'm going to have a little smoke. I'll be right back. And they said, no, we'll come with you. So the four of us go out into the smoking section. It's outdoor, attached to the bar. It's really tiny. There's 4 two-top tables and a wooden fence 6 feet tall. That's important later. 6 foot tall fence around us. And so that's it. So I am having a little smoke, and we're chatting, and all of a sudden we hear a really crazy commotion happening 40 feet away from us on the other side of the fence in the street. Not on La Cienega Boulevard, but on Westbourne, I think it's called. And we all peer over the fence, the 6 foot fence, and we can see that there's a guy on the ground, and there's a group, and he's in a fetal position, and he's just taking kicks and punches, and there's a group of 10, 12 men just pummeling him. And then there's a group of about 10, 12 other people, men and women, standing there, not doing anything. And this wasn't a fight. We thought this guy was going to be unalived within seconds. It was terrifying to watch. It was brutal. And we're screaming for help, security, police, where is everyone? But there's nobody there. We're outside. Everybody's inside the bar. So I realized there's not enough time to run inside and get help, or even run inside and go through the front door of the Nice Guy bar, which is a crazy, heavy, like vault type of door. And I also realized in those seconds that if a guy tried to intervene, the guy would probably get assaulted too. So in my little naive head, I was like, well, I'm a girl. I bet if I ran over and said, stop, stop, he's not fighting back, I can stop it. So I decided to jump the fence, and it was pretty easy for me to do because there's a small table about waist high next to me. So I just hopped up on that, swung my right leg over the fence, and there happened to be a wooden horizontal lip on the other side of the fence, so I could easily step down, swing my legs over, and get down, and then run over to the melee. When I ran over there was one guy in particular, and I'm screaming, get off of him, he can't fight back, it's over, it's over. The guy's face was rearranged, it was terrifying. So I ran over, and there's one specific guy on top of him, just wailing on him. So I take him by the shoulder, and I try to pull him off one time. He just shrugs me off like a gnat. So then I go a second time to go pull him off. And the second time, he finally turned around and looked at me, and at that point, I heard a scuffle behind me, because again, there's a dozen men beating him and stuff. So I turned my back to him to see what's happening right behind me. And at that point, that's the last thing I remember before I regained consciousness about 45 minutes later. That man who I pulled off, Alberto Daniel Driz, who was convicted, he hit me so hard in the back of the head that I lost consciousness before I hit the ground. When I woke up 45 minutes later, all the defendants were gone. They had, ran off to their cars and sped off before the police and the ambulance could arrive. I had a paramedic in my face, and he's like, "Oh, you're awake. We need to put you in the ambulance." And I was like, "No," and I'm in shock. And I also have no memory of being assaulted, so I'm confused why they're all worried about me. And I'm like, "No, I'm fine. No cops, no ambulance. Like, oh my God, I'm fine." And then I see the looks on everyone's faces, and then I touch my face, and I can taste the blood. I can feel my jaw is out to here. I can feel my forehead is out to here. It was 5 inches out. It was a traumatic brain injury. I had a concussion, and they thought this was bruised. It was dented from somebody's shoe. And I said, "Okay, maybe you should take me to the hospital." So I hop in the ambulance, and then I lost consciousness in and out for the next couple hours, and they took me to Cedars-Sinai to get treated. And I was in and out of the hospital for the next 48 hours. When we were in the hospital, I remember being on a stretcher in the hallway, and I was trying to answer questions to the best of my ability, with a traumatic brain injury. I was trying to help them, tell them what happened. And I remember being really worried, wondering if the guy had been unalived. So I asked the doctors, "Is he okay?" And they said, "Yeah, actually, there's several people here that were attacked by these men, and they're all here at the hospital, and that guy is in the other room." And the doctor said, "We're working on him. We might have to do facial reconstructive surgery on him, but we have to wait till the swelling goes down on his face before we can make that decision." So it was pretty scary. He eventually didn't have to have that, thank God, but he had pretty bad injuries. So we found out later down the road that during this assault, while I was unconscious, my brother ran out, tried to help, and he was sucker punched and attacked over and over by this group of men. His friend tried to then come out and protect me. No, he didn't know I was there at this point. He didn't know I was unconscious. He just saw my brother being assaulted. So you can see him in the security footage, not swinging at anyone. And he's a big guy, and he could have done damage. Nope. He just put his body in between the attackers and my brother, who was losing consciousness, and they were attacking him. And so the big guy just took the hits, was getting strangled, but he was just trying to de-escalate the situation. I found out that later that the woman we were with, who had witnessed all of this, she runs out after them, sees them attacking, it's a melee, and she sees my body on the ground not moving. So she drags my body off to the side, and she's checking my pulse, and she's screaming for help. She's screaming for help, and she's screaming for 911. And while she's doing this, one of the defendants, one of the identical twins, one of the Drizzes, who I'll be naming everybody in detail as we go with these parts, he came over to her while she's screaming and crying and checking my pulse, wondering if I'm alive. And he comes over and he calls her the C word, the one that rhymes with bunt, and he backhands her across the face. So this is the type of people we're dealing with. I found out too that the manager of the nice guy ran out. He heard the commotion, ran out, and he was one of the main witnesses who saw Alberto Daniel Driz with me on my back on the ground, and he was sitting on top of me, sitting on my chest with his knees on each side of my head. And the way he described it was that he looked and he saw him wailing like this, looking down and just over and over on my face while I was laying there unconscious. This manager was then attacked, sucker punched and attacked by Sean Driz, one of the defendants as well. He was injured, but this man saved my life. And this is something that we didn't know until years later, and I'll tell you why I came upon that evidence. So that's what happened that night. God, 10 minutes goes by really fast. That's what happened that night. I'm going to do as many more parts of these tonight, tomorrow, the next day after that. I'm going to keep posting these, until I go fetal. I'm going to take little breaks, but I'm going to keep them coming. Any questions, any advice, any fact-checking is welcome. If you guys wanted to tell me I'm doing something wrong with the video, I should do it like this, that, whatever, tell me, I'll listen. I'm open to everything. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of the comments and the support I've gotten in the last week when I started posting little stuff. It means everything. So thank you. More coming. Okay. Welcome to part 2 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. Today I'm going to try to fill in some holes and answer some questions that were asked on part 1, like how did this all begin? Two of the defendants, Alberto Daniel Driz and Maurice Driz, are identical twins. And that night, in April of 2015, they were celebrating their 60th birthdays. And they began the night having a dinner with all of their closest friends of 20, 25 people in the private room at a little restaurant around the corner called Ago in West Hollywood. So they had dinner there. I have photos of it. And they then did the after party around the corner over at the Nice Guy. They chose the Nice Guy because Alberto Daniel Driz has been longtime business partners, like 25, 30 years, with the owner of the Nice Guy, a man named Peter Corral. We're going to get to him in other parts. There's some current stuff happening there. I don't like that man. So they go over there to his buddy Peter Corral's bar, and they're doing, bottle service, whatever. They're just getting their after drinks for the rest of the night. And the night's coming to a close. So the Drizzes, all three Drizzes, and the fourth defendant, William Jolson, and all of their friends and their family and their girlfriends and stuff, they all go outside to leave, and they go to the valet after they've all been drinking, and they all go to get their cars. So I don't know if they were all drinking, but in a lot of their stories, when it changed the narrative down the road, they tried to say that they were drinking heavily. So whatever that means. So they're going to get their car. They go to the valet, who's an older man, and they start berating the man, handing him all these tickets, like, get this car, get that car, get that car. It's a Maserati, an Audi, a BMW, a Bentley. They're trying to get him to get all the cars. And so he grabs Maurice Driz's car first. I think it was a Maserati. I have to check. He brings Maurice's car and parks it right there in the front. And Maurice Driz is like, no, park it closer. I'm standing here. The car is right there, but I'd like you to move it here. And the valet is like, why would I do that, sir? Your car is in the very first spot. Just please, take the keys, drive away, and I'm going to help all of your friends out with their cars. So he starts getting in the valet's face, swearing at him, all this stuff. And then Sean Driz comes over, whispers in his dad's ear, and he's like, I got this, So he starts getting in his face. At this point, there's two TMZ paparazzi that happen to be standing there witnessing the entire thing. Their names are Jacob Castellan and Robert Sirachi. And by the way, their stories dramatically changed over time. Wonder why. But they're standing there, and they don't know who the Drizzes and any of them are because they're not celebrities. They're just celebrity adjacent. So they're looking at these guys like, hey, get off the valet's back. Your car's right here. Stop giving him a hard time. Sean Driz comes over, and he's like, I got this. He shoves Jacob Castellan, the TMZ pap, shoves him 3 times. Finally, he hits the ground. When Castellan hits the ground, at this point, this group of men decides, oh, let's jump him. So according to Castellan's testimony, they start punching, kicking, all that stuff, all at the same time going after him. Cameras breaking, all that stuff. So then the other paparazzi who was present, who, by the way, the narrative changed later, and they said that he was called to the scene, Sirachi was called to the scene after and showed up. So then suddenly he's not a witness or a victim anymore. Very interesting, huh? We'll get to that. So Robert Sirachi, in the first report, he says that he tried to help his friend because he was getting hit so hard. He's on the ground. It's 4, 5, 6 guys on one. So he's trying to help, but he got sucker punched and he loses consciousness. He's out. He's knocked out. It's funny because then all of a sudden it became, I wasn't even there. So anyways, Sirachi's out for the count. Castellan gets up and he's back. He's trying to protect his head and he's getting pushed and shoved. And that's when he gets pushed over from La Cienega area Boulevard down to the side street, which is then where my part 1 starts, where that's what we see. And we see this one guy getting just wailed on by a group of men. So that's how it began. After this happened, I went to the hospital the next day. I was in and out of the hospital the next couple days. And, Los Angeles, especially that kind of scene, it's a very small world. Everybody knows everybody. So word got out within hours after we were attacked, what had happened. And a lot of people reached out trying to help. A lot of people were like, wait a second, okay, hold on. Even somebody that worked at the Nice Guy. We knew their names, within the next week or so. Again, I had a traumatic brain injury, so I don't know the exact timing. I could just look in my notes and find out. But we knew the names pretty quick. And immediately after we knew who they were, we recognized their faces, everything. we found out from multiple people, like, oh, by the way, Sean Drizz has been he's the longtime boyfriend, serious boyfriend of Christina Schwarzenegger. Christina is the youngest sibling of the Schwarzenegger kids. So when I heard that, I remember being relieved, because at that point, my naive little self was like, well, her mom is Maria Shriver. Maria Shriver is a feminist. She's an ally. She's a journalist. So she's smart. She's got a heart. She's smart. She is not going to help these guys. And she's going to be a good mom. And she's going to sit her daughter down if she hasn't left Sean already. She's going to sit her daughter down. And she's going to say, honey, Christina, you're better than this. You're better than him. You do not need to be connected to any of these men in any way whatsoever. Like, let's all just cut ties. This is horrific. I hope Anne Green is okay. That didn't happen. Instead, I found out that not only Christina was the serious partner of Sean Drizz at the time of the assaults, but I found out also that the three Drizzes and Maria Shriver and Patrick Schwarzenegger, her son, that all of them were business partners. They were all the original investors and owners of Blaze Pizza franchise. Blaze Pizza is worth, it must be $1 billion corporation at this point. I know it's the fastest growing franchise of all time, surpassing McDonald's. Like, LeBron James is an investor. I think the owner of Panda Express is an investor. An owner of a baseball team and is an investor. It goes on and on. You were pretty lucky and wealthy to get in when you got in for Blaze Pizza. So I find out all of this, and I'm like, okay, well, at least Blaze Pizza, at least we know, like, they have money, they can pay for our injuries, because we had medical bills into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands. But I was like, okay, well, at least Blaze Pizza, they'll be good people, and they'll fire them after they hear about the arrests and the injuries, because everybody in town, in these small circles, like, everybody knows. That didn't happen. It's weird. We'll get to that. Then, during these couple of weeks after the assaults, while I'm at home, I've got black eyes, I have a hematoma, my traumatic brain injury, I have 5 inches out, my jaw, everything, and I was prescribed painkillers for about 2-3 weeks. So it's a little hazy during that time, but I did write everything down just in case, which came in handy. But, we found out that the guy I tried to help was a TMZ paparazzi afterwards too. And I was like, oh, well, good. Maybe this story, like, TMZ is going to take this story and they're going to post it. And we can find out who everybody there was, because we still, by the way, there's still 4 or 5 men that have never been identified, that all of the defendants and their friends have not offered that information. And I will name every single one of their friends that have not offered that information. But TMZ, the executive producer of TMZ named Charles Latibido, he co-hosts the TMZ show with Harvey Levin. Charles got my phone number and texted me, hey, we're so sorry about what happened. It was so nice of you to do what you did. And Harvey and I would love to take you out to lunch and thank you once you're feeling up to it and feeling healthy again. And I was like really moved by that. Like, that's really nice. I don't need anything. That's so nice. I would totally be okay with that. That never happened. I actually had to force Charles to meet me for like a slice of pizza several years down the line, because once the corruption and the intimidation began, I was like, no, I actually do need you guys to do a story. Even though you haven't done a story these last few years, like, if there's one thing TMZ loves, it's scandal. And this story, scandal and celebs and all this stuff. And this story involves a lot of A-list celebs, an adult film star, there's DV, there's SA, there's CSA, there's fraudulent transfers, racketeering, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, intimidation, stalking, hacking. It goes on and on and on. This is like their bread and butter. Why hasn't TMZ posted it? Isn't that interesting? Well, I know why. I've been documenting this for 9 years, keeping a paper trail, not doing phone calls with anybody anymore, because I want the paper trail so I can give it to you guys, so we can make change, because I've had enough of this. I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out the green screen. I'm old, my hip almost broke trying to do it. I went fetal. So I'm just going to post other posts after this with the screenshots and the evidence and stuff, and I'll have a friend help me do it right the next time. But thank you so much for coming, and I've got about 100 more posts in me. Thanks, guys. Welcome to part 3 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. In this part, I'm going to be going over what occurred in the aftermath in the first week or two after the assaults in 2015. Now, over those next several weeks, I was prescribed a lot of stuff to deal with the pain. I was recovering from a traumatic brain injury. Everything was swollen, bruised. It was a lot, but we still managed to get down to the police station and see doctors constantly over those next couple of weeks because we had to. About 8 to 10 days after the incident occurred, me, my brother, pretty much victims and support people came with us to go down to the Venice Police Department, or it's on Venice Boulevard, it's not in Venice, the LAPD. We went down there so that we could do a photo lineup, so we could pick out, they give you all the photos of the suspects and then other people, and then you have to circle which one, or recognize this one, and this is what this person did to me, and you write it down. And then you do it for each person over and over and over, and then we give our witness statements in person. And I remember when we pulled the car over, we parked and we were walking into the LAPD that day, and I had a neck brace and my face is out to here and a black eye and cuts and bruises. And my brother had 2 black eyes and tons of, just really bad injury. And we walk up to the front, and there's a door to the left and a door to the right at the LAPD, and there happened to be a couple of officers walking past. And so we said, "Hi, which door do we use? Which way do we go in?" And they look us up and down, and they said, "Oh, traffic accidents is that way." And we said, "We're not a traffic accident." And they were like, "Oh, sorry, then go in that door." And that was just... it was a little weird. It was also a little like comic relief. Like, wow, we look that bad. We look like we just got in a major car accident. Awesome. So we go in, and there's several officers tending to us, but specifically there is one, and his name is Sergeant Yearwood. He's retired now. In fact, I think he retired just a few months after that day when he was dealing with us and taking our statements down and everything. So we're in there, we're talking, and I need you to remember at this point, nobody knows. They have their names, the police have their names, they have photos of them that people had sent them and everything, but nobody knew who they were connected to yet. So at this point, this was being dealt with in a normal way. So I remember sitting at the table with everybody with me and the police officer, and Sergeant Yearwood starts to tell us what they have so far on the Drizzes. And what he told us was pretty wild. He said, "Okay, so yeah, we know that Alberto and Maurice were celebrating their 60th birthday last week, and everybody was there for that." He said, "So we found out that the Drizzes had rented a room or a guest house or something at a Bel Air mansion that the LAPD had previously busted for schmex workers working there. And this house in Bel Air, this mansion, had been used for that purpose. And so the Drizzes had rented a room for the night on their special birthday night at this mansion. So the LAPD found out about this. They contacted the woman who was in charge of this business, this mansion, and he tells us this entire story in front of multiple people. So we're all just like jaws on the ground, like, what? I mean, there's tracks that they have to pay for that, but yeah, okay, keep going. So Sergeant Yearwood then proceeds to tell us, he's like, "So we got a hold of the woman that runs it, and when we said their names, Maurice and Alberto, do you have any information? When are they coming back? Do you have anything, your cell phone numbers?" The woman was like, "Those guys? Yeah, I have all the information for you because they treat the girls here like crap. So what do you need to know? You got it." So again, very consistent with the behavior and the character of these guys. So the woman was like, "You got it." And she just handed over that cell phone number of Maurice Driz like that. So Sergeant Yearwood goes, these guys, they don't know that we're onto them. They don't know that we have, statements and blah, 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 blah. Like, they don't know yet. We haven't made contact with them. But we're going to do it right now in front of you guys on speakerphone. So we're sitting there like, what? Like, oh my God, this is crazy. So just waiting to see them already start lying, we were just like, let's do this. So he calls Maurice's cell on speakerphone while we're sitting there like, Jesus. And Maurice picks up. And Sergeant Yearwood proceeds to just play like, good cop, where he's like, "Hey, this is Sergeant so-and-so. Don't worry, you're not in any trouble at all, but we just heard that you might have been present or a witness to an incident that happened at the Nice Guy last week. And we just wanted to see if there's any information you could give us that would be really helpful to our case." And you could hear like gulp through the speakerphone. And he kind of, Maurice goes silent for a little bit and he goes, nope. No, it was a pretty quiet eventless night. It was a nice evening. It was our birthday, but other than that, can't really remember anything that would be of importance to you. Sorry. And the officer was like, okay, you sure? There's nothing, you didn't see anything? Because, you know, some girl got hurt there. So maybe you could, and he's like, nope. And you know what, officer? My attorney is Robert Shapiro. So if you have any more questions, you should contact him. And by the way, I'm losing you. Bye. And then he hangs up. So this goes down and we're like, oh my gosh, he's having heart palpitations right now. Oh my gosh. And then we're like, whoa, he just dropped Robert Shapiro. He's got him on retainer. Like, wow, okay. So we're there for another 45 minutes or so, maybe an hour. And we're still giving statements. We're asking them questions. They're asking us questions. And we're still sitting at this same desk that we just did this whole call at. And while we're sitting there talking to Sergeant Yearwood, he was really nice to us, by the way. Talking to Sergeant Yearwood, an LEO, law enforcement officer, that's LEO. An LEO walks over, and he's hurrying over. And by the way, leading up to this moment, all the police officers, like when they saw our injuries, they had already been talking about our case leading up. So when we walked in, there was definitely a sense of like, they were being really nice to us and little smiles, little pats on the back, and like, can I get you coffee? Can I get you water? Like a lot of that going on. So we're sitting there. About an hour goes by after this phone call had happened, and this officer comes over, he hurries over, and he whispers, and he's got this look on his face like, Sergeant Yearwood, and he goes over and he whispers in his ear, and I just kind of like went and pretended I was fumbling on my phone, but I was hearing every single word because I was about 2 feet away, and I hear this officer whisper into his ear, Sir, Robert Shapiro is here, and he's with them. Them meaning the defendants. I gotta say, there was a sense of like starstruck, like the Robert Shapiro, the guy that got OJ off, you know, like that was the kind of the vibe I got from this officer as he whispers that. And Sergeant was like, oh, okay. Let's see what happens. Let's deal with that, whatever. So apparently Shapiro, within, like, obviously Maurice called him immediately after this phone call, and Shapiro was like, and told him what really happened. And then Shapiro was obviously like, okay, you're gonna be arrested, so we need to get you down to the LAPD and turn yourself in immediately, because or else you're gonna have cops at your door, at your mansion, at your luxury Beverly Hills condo. We can't have that. I'm gonna bring you down there myself, and we'll get you fingerprinted, mugshots, everything, and I'll get you in and out, you know? So they did. So he brought him down there. And like, by the way, they all live in Beverly Hills and stuff. This is way down south on Venice Boulevard. Like, this is far. This is like, it's like a 40-minute drive at least. So they all took about 3 minutes to get ready and shot themselves down there. Like, like, it was crazy. So this all happens, and I start to have a little bit of a meltdown in the LAPD because I'm like, I can't be in the same room with them. And then we were ready to leave, and we were like, I can't bump into them. So they made a point of making sure that the defendants all left in one exit and that we left in another, and they walked us to our car so there would be no crossover. Thank God. That was very nice of them. An LAPD officer told us on the very next time we had a meeting, you know, we were talking about all this, and an LAPD officer told me, I wrote this down on a little flashcard because I had a brain injury, but I wanted to remember everything. So an LAPD cop told us when Shapiro walked the defendants into the police station that day, Shapiro asked an officer, did they really beat up a girl? Officer said, yeah. And Shapiro said, those mother-ers, F word. So, yeah. 10 minutes is up soon. Okay, I might post another part today because I had so much more to say. So thanks for following along, and thank you so much, everybody, for all the sweet and kind, supportive comments. I'm going to keep going. Thanks. Welcome to part 4 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. Today, I kind of wanted to go through a little bit what happened after the hospital, after the assaults, after the hospital, and hopefully I'll be able to start leading into the preliminary criminal trial that began about 8 months after the assault happened. But I did want to touch upon something that I forgot to mention when I was describing the entire melee assault, all that stuff in part 2. I don't even know. But I want to say that the employees of the Nice Guy, the bartender, the doorman, the bar back. I'm not exactly sure of their job titles. I just know, like, for example, one of the guys in the security footage that we see of them assaulting the men. There's no security footage of my assault that was made available to us. That's how I'll word it. But in the videos of the other people being assaulted, you can see like employees running out of the Nice Guy, and one had like a little white rag out of his back pocket. So I assumed he was either a bartender or a bar back or something like that, but clearly an employee. The doorman, big guy, he ran out. All of them trying to de-escalate the situation as best they could. Like pulling, like trying to stay in between, pulling attackers off of people, never taking a swing or anything. And they were getting shoved and thrown around too. And, I kudos to them for trying to de-escalate it in the best way they knew how. I remember when I got put into the ambulance, the very last memory before I lost consciousness again, was I was laying in the stretcher inside the ambulance. The 2 back doors were open. The paramedics were inside with me doing something, who knows. And as they went to go close the doors, all of a sudden a hand sticks through, and it was the doorman, big guy, don't know his name, but he stuck his arm through and was like, wait, and he's like, I just want to make sure you're okay, and just so you know, like, he was like all out of breath and everything, and he's like, just so you know, I just chased them down, and like I took photos of all their license plates as they tried to speed away, so I got that, you're gonna be okay. And I just it meant a lot. And I remember like my skull was like falling apart, and I just remember being really grateful for that, and I still am. So thank you to that man, whoever he was. Some people do the right thing sometimes. And I also want to make clear that the employees, the ones working their shifts that night, the manager, the bar back, the doorman, they were all incredible in the way they handled it. That has nothing to do with the owners of the Nice Guy, Peter Corral. That's going to be an entire part in itself once I get to start talking about where the money has been hidden, and like when I start touching upon what a fraudulent transfer is and stuff like that. So we'll get to that. That comes down a little bit towards civil. So as of now, you guys, I've touched upon, that there's Schwarzenegger's business partners are involved, that their daughter's boyfriend, possible fiance is involved. That's a whole nother thing too. But I've had about 20 people reach out to me over the last 6 months and the last weekend saying, hey, I've heard that they're engaged or secretly married now. So that's interesting. I don't know if it's true or not, but I'll find out. But it's just interesting, all these people, we have Ray. I mean, first of all, Jack Nicholson's son, A-list movie star, Jack Nicholson's son, Ray, who looks just like him. He stars in Amazon Prime movies and stuff like that. Shows he was in the first 5 minutes of the movie Promising Young Woman, and it's almost like he's playing himself. You got to watch the first 5-10 minutes of Promising Young Woman, because Ray, you can tell which one he is. He's sitting at the bar with the antagonist, and he's just acting like this, like, yeah, man, go hit it, go take advantage of that girl. Like, man, did they even give him a script, or did he just like wing it and ad-lib it when he went in? Because it is so. I love that movie so much, and it really, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies watching that first 5 minutes, because I'm like, damn, am I the promising young woman? And is this like art imitating life, or life imitating art? Because gross. So it's just interesting. We have these big names involved, and I still haven't even gotten to the rest of the big names, but this is what I found out later that nobody told us. But it's interesting because one of the people that was helping us out with doctor's appointments and communicating with the LAPD and stuff like that, because we were all too injured to do so ourselves, I found an email. And this is what this is what the person said in the email that we were talking about, trying to coordinate stuff in the week right after the assault. Says, LAPD said that Harvey Levin doesn't want to publicize this because it's bad publicity for them. And also, it doesn't involve any celebs, so no one's going to care. It's so interesting. Because they reached out to me, and I never asked them first. They reached out to me, and on multiple occasions, they had said they were going to do a story, and that they were going to pump this into the atmosphere so that the public would know, so we could get justice. They said that they offered to do that, and I was like, that is so amazing. Wow, TMZ, everyone's going to see it. And then they didn't. And I remember I was like talking to Charles Latibido, the executive producer, and at one point he was like, I was like, so how come you guys aren't gonna post it? You haven't posted it yet. And I'm trying to be nice and like, and he says, yeah, and this is 2016, I believe, at this point. And he's like, yeah, it's just that there's a lot of, we're so busy. There's so much Trump stuff. So we're too busy. And I took it because like at this point, like I've been through so much at this point. I needed to trust people. So I was like doing mental gymnastics in my mind to be like, that sounds fair. That's legit. Yeah. Clearly they only have one writer over there and one computer and they're all sharing a phone. So I get it. This is probably, yeah, that makes sense. Totally legit. So I fell for that one. And he told me this over time, several times. I also want to get to, now we're kind of heading into the criminal trial that finally starts like 6-7 months later. Oh, and by the way, I want to just a ballpark number. I believe in the last, it was about 7 years between the assault and then the final day of the verdict of the civil trial, which was like years later. 7 years in there. And I want to say we probably had about 30 to 40 delays at the last second to delay hearings, delay everything. Probably 30 or 40, all done by the other side, by the defense. That they would delay everything. Like, and so when I put together that list of all of their BS excuses, like you're not going to know if you're going to want to laugh, scream, or cry when you hear it, and the fact that the system kept allowing it. One of the very first delays we had, I can't find it on any piece of paper, but I remembered it in my head. I can find it later. One of the first delays, it was in like August of 2015, summertime, and we were told that our hearing for everybody, all the victims, everybody, that it would have to be delayed because Sean Grizz was attending a wedding somewhere, and I think it was like on location somewhere, not in LA, and so he had to go, and so they delayed it for him, for that. Just thought you'd want to know, because yeah, just get that one off my chest. Okay, so now we're kind of heading into the preliminary criminal trial, December 15th, 2015. One of the things we thought was really interesting was that the arrest, when Shapiro brought the defendants down to the LAPD to turn themselves in, get fingerprints, mugshots, and get out, they were there for no more than an hour. For crushed skulls and like crushed intestines, and we have video footage, we have witnesses, we have medical records, and they were in and out in less than an hour. Like, oh, here's a checkbook, whatever, and out. Like, how is that possible? Okay, so I broke down, I have about a stack of transcripts, which is about maybe like a foot or so high. It's 1,100 pages of the criminal trial. And so I've read it 4 times through, and every single time I read it once through, and then the second time I started breaking it down into notes. And so I would and I've done that for every single transcript, every deposition, everything. So I have a lot of notes, and that's how I remember a lot of this stuff. And a lot of the stuff I have, like, the bullet points of, like, I'll be like, oh, that's a contradiction, that's a lie, that's perjury. So I write all those down, and I have it, like, in note form. But then I also have a lot of stuff where if it's an important quote that I want to repeat to you guys, I wrote it down verbatim and everything with the page number and the line number and all that stuff. So I'm just, like, I'm not just, just pulling stuff out of the air. This is where I got it from, and fact check me, go for it. But so when the trial said, oh, damn it, okay, it's 9:20. All right, I guess we're going to do the criminal trial. We'll do that on part 5, which I'm going to try to do today. I didn't post for the last, like, day and a half because I needed to be in a fetal position and just turn my brain off. So thank you guys again so much. It's been insane seeing all your comments and everything. It fuels me. So thank you, and I'll be back. Welcome to part 5 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. Today we're going to start getting into the preliminary criminal trial, and I'm going to start with day 1. The judge for the criminal trial, the initial judge who did the trial, was amazing. So much respect. His name is Judge Michael E. Pastor. He was incredible. He would stop the defense attorneys from being rude and disrespectful to me when I was on the stand. He'd call them out and tell them to, knock it off. When I would be breaking down on the stand, I remember so clearly that he would he'd look me in the eyes and ask me if I'm okay and ask me if I need a minute. And I was always like, no, let's keep going. Like, I don't want to come back here. Let's just keep going. But I really appreciated it so much. And the way he was clocking all of the information, the lies, the perjury from everybody, he was not dumb. He understood what was happening. And he made it very clear his stance by the end of it. He was immediately removed right before sentencing. After he said a statement, it was something like, the defendants have shown that they're an extraordinary threat to society, something like that. And then the very next day, he was taken off our case with no explanation. So Judge Michael E. Pastor was amazing during the trial while he was there. The attorneys, the criminal defense attorneys, the famous attorneys for the broke defendants were Robert Shapiro, who was representing Maurice Driz, Thomas Mesereau, who was representing Alberto Daniel Driz. If you don't know that name, Thomas Mesereau represents really wonderful people like Danny Masterson, Bill Cosby, Robert Blake. The list goes on. You can Google him and dry heave if you want. And then Sean Driz's attorney was Donald Rhee. So let's get into day one. This is about December 15th, 2015. So this is about 8 months of delays after the assault had happened. And we get into day one, and the very first witness on the stand was the woman who I'd mentioned earlier, I think in part one. And she's the woman that had dragged my body off to the side from the assailants. And she was checking my pulse to see if I was alive. And one of the Driz twins came over and backhanded her for checking my pulse. So the interesting thing was also, I'll just back up, is that's a pretty big deal. Everything I just described, that if you're a witness and a victim in an attempted murder case, clearly you're going to be needed for the criminal trial. Guess what? She wasn't subpoenaed. Nobody told her. She had moved out of town immediately after the assaults had happened, so I hadn't seen her for like 8 months, hadn't really spoken to her. And maybe the week before the trial began, I reached out to her. Like, I think I DM'd her on Instagram or something, and I was like, hey, it's been a while. I hope you're well. I guess I'll see you next week. It'd be great. I don't know how long if you're in town, but it'd be great to grab lunch with you or something. And she responded, what trial? It's happening? Nobody told me. So that was wild. And so I had to tell her, yeah, it's happening in a few days, whatever. So we had to act quick and fly her in from out of town to get her so she could come testify. So that was the first of the, what's going on? Is this just sloppy or is this intentional? It was intentional. So day one, she gets up on the stand and one of her first quotes, she says, 2 or 3 guys were beating Ann up, end quote. She talks about how Driz backhanded her. So those are pretty important witness statements. So it's a good thing we got her to fly in. Also, while she was being questioned by Robert Shapiro, he told his first lie. An attorney under the California State Bar told his first lie on the record. And Robert Shapiro tried to make it sound that I was lying about jumping over the fence. For some reason, they were really pushing that narrative really hard for 7 years. But he was like, the fence is 7 feet tall. How is somebody 5'6" like her going to get over it? And so that was the beginning of 7 feet tall. By the way, the fence goes up and down like 1.5 feet and stuff over the course of this criminal trial. It's going to be very interesting. And I'll make sure to point each and every single lie by the attorneys out. Maybe we could talk to the California State Bar about all this stuff. But anyways, so next up on the stand is Jacob Castellan. We're still in day one of the trial. Jacob Castellan is the TMZ paparazzi who I saw getting beat up, that we all saw getting beat up. And so he's the one that I jumped over the fence to get to try to help. And he's also, both of the TMZ paps, as I'll remind you, there's a lot of damage and, violence that they mention in their witness statements to the police and a bit in the criminal trial. But by the time 5 years later, 6 years later that we get to the civil trial, suddenly one of them was actually never there, even though he said he got knocked unconscious and da-da-da-da. Suddenly, he wasn't even there. He just showed up after everything had happened. And then Jacob Castellan, his injuries went from almost had to get facial reconstruction surgery that his doctors said to, it was just a little this, little that. I'm fine. And it's weird that anybody would try to sue for damages. That's unethical. That was kind of his vibe at the civil trial, the gist of his testimony. Oh, I can't wait to get into detail of that. So Jacob Castellon, he gets on the stand. He starts talking about how everything started with the valet getting berated by Maurice Driz, and then Sean Driz attacking him, and then all of his friends jumping in. So he actually says, and I quote, "All the gentlemen with them," the Drizzes, "were kicking and punching me on the ground." He said Sean Driz and Maurice Driz both kicked him in the head. And then here's another quote. "Then, all of a sudden, only one or two people were doing it. You know why, Jacob? Because they went off of you and they all started taking turns on my lifeless body. That's why. That's why only one or two. The rest of them went to me." So I hope it was worth it changing your testimony by the civil trial. We'll get to that. He then mentions that he had a $3,000 camera, company camera that TMZ provides their paparazzis with. They're fancy, you know. He had a $3,000 camera, and it was destroyed by the defendants and their friends. And he has videos of the Drizzes. He has all this stuff. We can use it to identify people, everything, who was there, to see if, Ray Nicholson was there, to see if Christina Schwarzenegger was there in the background. And all of that was never handed in because he testified under oath that EHM Productions, the umbrella company that owns TMZ, ordered all the SD cards of the paparazzi's cameras to be destroyed that night, instead of being handed over in the criminal investigation to the LAPD, to the DA. Nope. The parent company of TMZ ordered the evidence to be destroyed. So, he also says, Jacob says, since his camera, like his big camera was destroyed, he took his company work phone that was also provided by TMZ, and he used that to take photos of the license plates of all of the cars of the defendants and their friends as they were fleeing. None of those photos were ever handed over. Again, everything was ordered to be destroyed by TMZ's parent company, EHM Productions. So, he then starts to talk about his injuries, and Jacob says, and this is like pretty serious, he says, so his injuries were his jaw was swollen shut. His jaw was swollen shut. He had a lot of scrapes and he had lots of cuts and he had a pretty sore back for a while. Then he attempts to downplay his injuries. And I noticed this when I was reading the transcript, that suddenly the word "just" kept sticking out to me, repetitive. And he says, and these are all direct quotes, verbatim, "I just went to the ER. They said it was all just soft tissue damage. I was off work for about a month. Stretches, heating pads, but that was about it." That's a really interesting way to describe such a violent assault and having thousands of dollars of damage done to the property of your boss's property. Like, it's very, very interesting. And then by the end of his testimony, he switched from, instead of saying, I was off work for a month, he switched over and said it was just 2 months. Well, that's interesting, because when I went and had a piece of pizza with Charles Thibodeau, the executive producer of TMZ, several years later, a couple years, I can find the date and the transcript of our conversation. But Charles told me that Jacob was extremely shaken up and that he was out of work for 3 months and he didn't know if he ever wanted to be out in the field ever again. So a lot of contradictions here. It's very interesting. So that's about all the time we have for this part. I'm going to get to the rest of day 1 in part 6. Thank you guys so much for coming. Welcome to part 6 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. Today I'm going to cover the end of day 2 of the preliminary hearing, and then we're going to go into day 3. So day 2, we had witness number 3 get up on the stand, and witness number 3 was the big guy I mentioned earlier who just used his big body to take the hits and the strangles while he was trying to protect my brother. You can see that on the security footage. I also want to note that all of us who gave all of our statements to the LAPD that week, that very first week, all of us gave all these statements, including TMZ Paps and everybody, and all of our statements were done before we were made aware that there was 2 cameras for security cameras from buildings next door that got most of the assaults on camera. So, and everything we said coincided with what was later found on the footage. Interesting thing though was that the LAPD lost all of our our initial witness statements, and they also refused to hand them over to the DA this whole time, which must be a coincidence. I'm sure it was just a sloppy mistake. So, witness number 3, he gets on the stand, the big guy, and he testifies that he was knocked to the ground from behind. Another note, every single one of us, every single victim, besides the woman that was holding my body, checking my pulse, every single one of us, the initial hit we first took was from behind every time. Not cowardly at all, not gross behavior from the Drizzes and all of their buddies. So witness number 3, he then testified he was kicked in the head multiple times by all 3 Drizzes. And then he also witnessed a nice guy employee run out trying to help and de-escalate, which they were, which we all saw in the footage. Witness number 4 gets on the stand. So witness number 4 testifies that they saw Maurice Drizz assaulting me. They testified that they lost consciousness multiple times, and when they awoke, the Drizz twins were both assaulting him. And his injuries were, this is funny because the TMZ guy, Jake Castellan, down the road in the civil trial was shading us, saying that this was like, that we were filing a lawsuit just to get money or something, like kind of that vibe. But the injuries of witness number 4 was broken nose, fat lip, bruised ribs, fractured back, 7 centimeters of small intestine removed in an emergency surgery, sprained knee, sprained ankle, 2 black eyes, and a severe concussion. Okay, so let's move on to day 3 of the preliminary trial, and I think that was February 4th, 2016. So day 3 starts. This is where stuff starts to get wild. And a lot of this stuff, I want to remind you too, that so like when you're in a trial like this and hearings like this, criminal, all the witnesses and all of us, when we're there, we all have to sit in the hallways, not inside the courtroom. We're not allowed to be inside the courtroom when somebody is testifying. And the reason for that is so that if somebody testifies about the incident, that it won't like sway your memory or change it in a wrong way or factually wrong way or something like that. So they make sure everybody stays out in the hallway while everyone's going on one at a time. And then they also tell you, don't talk about what happened in court with each other after you leave. So it's really interesting. So that's like the way to make it fair and legal, which it makes sense to do that. So about a year or 2 later, I can find the date, when I caught the first lie from somebody whose job it was to specifically tell the truth about this case. When I caught the first of hundreds of lies, the first one was a pretty big lie, and it was involving the Schwarzeneggers. This lie that I was told. I'll get to that down the road, what this lie was that opened the can of worms. But when they told me this, I was just like, they would never lie to me. This person would never lie to me. Why would they lie to me? This doesn't make sense. I couldn't believe what I was seeing with my own eyes and hearing with my own ears. So that's why I decided to go and spend, thousands of dollars out of my own pocket to start buying the first of the transcripts, because I wanted to prove myself wrong. I really needed to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong. And I was sure of it once I bought the transcript, the 1,100-page transcript of this hearing. I was sure I would be wrong, and then we could all go back to trusting the system. And instead, when I bought this transcript, I found hundreds of more important lies, crucial evidence, things that we were not told, that we should have been told, that we should have been made aware of. So, that was a really hard time in my life, by the way, trying to wrap my head around people that are supposed to care about you, and they are intentionally, on a daily basis, sabotaging your life. That messed me up in the head a lot. Yeah. So we get to day 3, and this was interesting because, Shapiro. So Robert Shapiro, he says this statement. Remember, he is Maurice Drizz's attorney. So he's drilling witness number 3, and he's kind of trying to change the narrative and throw the facts out the window and stuff like that. And Shapiro actually says, "Isn't it true Anne fell? You don't recall her losing her balance when she went over?" They were trying to change the narrative to say that my black eyes, my jaw sticking out 4 inches, and my skull hanging out 5 inches, traumatic brain injury, and all of the other stuff. They were trying to say that I hurt myself falling down off of the fence, which, again, like once my leg was over, I was only 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and I just stepped down. It wasn't, I didn't even have to like jump. It was just like I like stepped down the ledges. So he was trying to change that narrative. He's like, the fence is 7 feet tall, Anne is 2 feet tall, the fence is 20 feet tall, and like maybe she, traumatic brain injury from tripping. So, which is funny because like Ray Nicholson, when he got deposed down the line, he kind of alluded to that too. It's so interesting that he would go with the same narrative that his father, Jack Nicholson's best friend, Robert Shapiro, you can Google that article, would say. So Shapiro, defending one of the Drizzes, but they're helping all of each other. They're all kind of working together, All 3 Drizzes went to Beverly Hills High School, okay? Like, Beverly Hills High School, which is even funnier. I tried to post something, but TikTok was like, no, which is fair. But I tried to post screenshots with stuff blurred out, but I didn't do it well enough. But like, I have screenshots of all of Sean Drizz's tweets from around the time before and after, mostly right before the assault. And that Beverly Hills boy likes to use the N-word. And there's homophobic stuff in there. There's stuff he says about what he wants his girlfriend to be doing. I can't even say it or post it. I'm afraid to post it again. I don't want to get like TikTok mad at me. But yeah, so these are our Beverly Hills boys. So Shapiro says, and this just like made me so angry. Like it's so problematic. So Shapiro says to the witness, because he's trying to say it couldn't have been these guys, not these gentlemen that I've known for 25 years. No way. He says, and I quote, in this society, unfortunately, people that come to these clubs aren't only people that live in West Hollywood, unquote. They were from Beverly Hills. You're right. They weren't from West Hollywood. They were from Beverly Hills. What are you trying to say? Like, what are you trying to say? What do you think he was trying to say, friends, audience? That just made me so angry. Like, because we're from out of town. I don't know. I wonder who he was alluding to. I'm sure he doesn't use the N-word and stuff like Sean publicly does, and it's probably still there. Either way, I have screenshots if he deleted it. So the next part, this is the last thing I'll tell before I go. So then Shapiro tried to convince the witness that I was the one that possibly hurt. Like, then they tried to say that, all of them, the defendants, were actually really hurt. Yes, we do remember that night now, and we were assaulted and blah, blah, blah. And Shapiro, oh my God, I need room to do this, but he said, like, don't you remember Anne running out to the group, and she was running out with her arms flailing to the side? So can you imagine me? I'm running out to a group of 20 men with my arms flailing like this, like I'm one of those things in front of a car dealership, It's like, I don't even know. So yeah, he tried to put that. And now before I get to the craziest part about day 3, about the entire preliminary trial, I'll do that on part 7, the next part. Maybe I'll just shoot that right now. We'll see. Thank you so much, everybody, for following, for commenting, for liking. I think I might do a live soon. I'm going to have somebody show me what that's about and stuff so I can answer questions like that, and I'll let you guys know when I'm going to do it. But thank you so much for sticking around. I really appreciate the support. Thanks. Okay. Welcome to part 7 of Don't Say Schwarzenegger. Today I'm going to cover what happened during the rest of witness number 4's testimony. This is one of the craziest parts of the trials, but there's a lot of crazy parts, but this is one of them. This is where it kind of begins to get nuts. So in the middle of his testimony, the judge was like, can you actually step down from the stand and leave the courtroom, go into that back room, where you can't hear anything, because we need to have a word about something without the witness here. So he leaves, and Judge Michael E. Pastor says to Robert Shapiro, once he's gone, he says to Robert Shapiro, excuse me, but have Alberto Driz and Maurice Driz switched chairs? Remember, they're identical twins. So he asked him if they switched chairs, the defendants. And Shapiro's like, the guy who claimed to be besties with them for 25 years was like, oh, did they? And he literally said, I can't tell them apart. I'm sorry. I mean, they're identical twins, but if you're close friends with someone for 25 years, you can tell them apart like that. Like, that's just not even, I know twins. We all know twins. So he says that. So he catches the twins switching chairs. And this was the interesting part, that Shapiro, before this hearing began, he actually, we found out from the judge, and I quote, I'm taking this very seriously because I accommodated counsel, Shapiro, when counsel wanted various defendants, the twins, located in a certain position. And I believe that Maurice Driz has changed his location from yesterday to today. I don't know where Alberto had been sitting. So the judge calls out and says it on record that Shapiro specifically asked that there be specific seats for everyone to sit. Now, another thing during this beginning of this trial that I thought was funny, and I just started taking notes in the hallway before during the day at every single day of this criminal thing, I noticed a mile away on certain days that the twins would be dressed identical. These are grown men. Like, don't you stop dressing identical when you're like an 8-year-old girl with pigtails? I don't know. Side note. But anyways, I noticed that they were dressed identical shoes, pants, like cashmere sweaters, vest, everything, except they would be in a slightly different shade, like the same brand, the same fit, everything. Like, so one would wear like let's say a cashmere sweater and it would be gray. And the other twin on the same day would wear a cashmere sweater, the exact same brand, everything, but dark gray. Or like, just like very, very, very like just, so they weren't identical, same outfit. Just one thing on the outfit would be one shade darker or lighter than the other twin. So I decided, and not knowing where this would lead, I started writing down everything that they were wearing every single day. And on some days they'd be identical, and on others they would be wearing, like one would wear a tie, like completely different, and one would wear a vest and different colors and stuff. So it was weirdly noticeable. And I've worked on commercials and modeling shoots for 20 plus years. So when you notice that somebody has a bad wardrobe stylist because things aren't cohesive to what's happening, or they're too similar or something, you notice. So I noticed and I wrote everything down. And then years later, I figured out that was a really good thing that I did that. So Shapiro pretends, he actually says, oh, Your Honor, oops, that was an oversight, I guess. This is the first of many oversights that Shapiro has, and Thomas Mesereau. So this oversight, and the judge was like, this is not cool. Like, I'm paying attention. They shouldn't be switching chairs from day to day and between lunch and breaks and stuff like that, and between witness testimonies. That is not okay. So that happens. Then, before they can call witness number 4 back in, the deputy who works in the courtroom, the guy, I don't want to call him a police officer. I'm not sure, but he's the deputy. I think he's armed. I don't know. But so Deputy Jones actually interjects, and he's like, one more thing. Hold on, where is this? He says, oh, okay. So the judge goes, it's also come to my attention that one of the defendants at one point in time was wearing green glasses, and I don't know whether green glasses have been used by both defendants during the proceedings at different times. So I remember this well because I wrote down, because one of them wears glasses all the time and the other twin doesn't. So one of them I noticed, like one day when he wore glasses, they were like fluorescent bright green glasses. Like you could see them from the end of the hallway. It was like a fashion statement, like a statement piece, So they were caught switching seats. They were caught switching clothes. So it was really interesting when so let's see, the bailiff. The bailiff says, this morning when I observed Mr. Alberto Driz on the end here was wearing glasses that Mr. Maurice Driz has now. He had them on his head. As of now, they've switched glasses. So I think Maurice was the one that said, oh, I just need them to see. Can you imagine being the owner of like a dozen Blaze Pizza locations, and you have money, you drive Maseratis and all this stuff, and you can't afford 2 pairs of glasses between twins, adult men in their 60s? Like, not shady at all, right, everyone? What do you think? So that was that. And again, Shapiro pretended to be, he played the whole like, what? That's crazy. I had no idea. What? So really believable stuff. And then at one point, so the judge admonishes them and is like, don't pull this stuff in my courtroom. Like, let's Now we have to be really clear where everyone's sitting and nobody's allowed to switch again. So everybody agrees. They bring witness number 4 back into the room. And at that point, he identified Alberto Driz as one of my attackers. So the last thing I'll mention before I end this part is that Shapiro produced a nice guy bar tab, and it didn't have an SDT. I forget what that means with the actual definition, whatever. But the definition is you can't just produce random evidence in a trial, in a hearing or whatever that you haven't. It has to be subpoenaed. It has to be shown to counsel. It has to be shown to the judge. Everyone has to know it. You can't just whip things out of a briefcase and be like, well, and that's exactly what Shapiro did. A very experienced criminal defense attorney. He whips out a bar tab from the nice guy with no SDT. And remember, the owner of the nice guy is Peter Corral, who is he was both business partners. He owned 7 from All Mankind Jeans with Alberto. So they're best friends, they were business partners, whatever. And Peter Corral, the owner, who they must have gotten this bar tab from, which by the way was proven to be non-admissible and it was fake. And it had all these big drinks like Belvedere and stuff like that. And none of us were drinking Belvedere. So it was a fake bar tab. So I don't know if Shapiro faked it and didn't tell anyone about it, or if Peter Corral faked it and printed it out from the nice guy and then gave it to him. But either way, it was not admissible and it wasn't real. So he tried to pull that out, and the witness number 4 looked at it, and he's trying to get him to agree that that's his bar tab. But he read it and immediately said, yeah, that's not ours. Like, none of us even drink that, like, at any point, whatever. So that was that. That was the crazy day, and it only gets crazier from here on out with all of the defense's casual oversights. The next part I'm going to get into is when I take the stand. So I'm going to have to take a breath before I do that one. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I appreciate everything. I'm getting so many DMs from so many people about giving tips, validating things I've said about these celebrities and stuff and how they treat women. It's been a lot, but it's been really, really amazing, and I appreciate all of it. So thank you, guys.